Thanks so much for joining me again. I think we're called Classic ASMR. And as I've already mentioned a few times, I used ASMR, whispering ASMR, to relax originally, actually, when I had COVID back in 2020. So I thought I'd kind of pass on the favour a little bit. Also, as you may know if you've been here before, we're hoping to get enough followers to raise some finance to produce theatre. I'm primarily a writer, and we are I've done a few productions, things that I've written. Most recently, my version of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol was in New York, off-Broadway, which was very exciting, although I sadly couldn't get there. And as you'll know, if you've been here before, by the way, thank you so much. I think we need to get to 1,000 followers, and about a week ago we had 12, I think, and now we've got 85 as I speak to you now. So thank you so much if you have followed, and also thank you so much for the comments. I never really realised what a lovely community. I mean, I guess you're always going to kind of get negative comments, but everyone's been so helpful, and including, I won't mention him because I haven't asked the person who told me how I could upload a short, which apparently you have to do to YouTube. Hopefully by now there will be 2 or 3 shorts up there. But this is a continuing story from this book that I kind of bought almost by accident from a bookshop on the Charing Cross Road in London, England. It cost me, I think I've shown you before, I shouldn't torture myself because it was hugely expensive really for what it was. Yeah, £65. I don't know what that is in dollars, but it's a lot of money. But it's such a lovely book. Sorry, a bit of a cold as well. And I know there's a book, an antiquarian book seller in Mayfair in London. I know him a little bit, and he says you never actually own old books. You just look after them until the next set of people takes them on, which I quite like. So, let's continue. I think this is episode 5 of this story, and it will probably conclude it. I'm also still suffering a little bit from my winter cold. This is called The 7 Poor Travellers, as you can see, written by Charles Dickens. Of course, who wrote A Christmas Carol. This was written in 1854. And I think here, there's a little illustration here somewhere. Which I'd like to try and get to. Oh, I think it's a bit later on, not to worry. Yeah, let's move on to where we left off. This is my Welsh bookmark. Placed in mid-Wales. It's actually on the Dylan Thomas Trail. Dylan Thomas, Welsh poet, perhaps most famous for writing Under Milkwood, a play for voices. And we're going to be exploring that later on this channel. I kind of know some of his family quite well. In fact, I'm working on a play as well, which I might share with you at another point. Yeah, but not now, because we are back checking out the fortunes, I'm sorry about that, of Lieutenant, as we say in the UK, Lieutenant Richard Doubledick. Continuing his saga, slowly labouring at last through a long, heavy dream of confused time and place, presenting faint glimpses of army surgeons whom he knew, and of faces that had been familiar to his youth, dearest and kindest amongst them Mary Marshall's, with a solitude upon it, more like reality than anything he could discern. Lieutenant Richard Doubledick came back to life. To the beautiful life of a calm autumn evening sunset, to the peaceful life of a fresh, quiet room with a large window standing open, a balcony beyond, in which were moving leaves and sweet-smelling flowers. Beyond again, the clear sky with the sun full in its light, sight, I should say, pouring its golden radiance on his bed. It was so tranquil and lovely that he thought he'd passed into another world. And he said in a faint voice, "Taunton, are you near me?" A face bent over him. Not his mother's. "I came to nurse you. We have nursed you many weeks. You were moved here long ago. Do you remember nothing?" "Nothing." The lady kissed his cheek and held his hand, soothing him. "Where is your regiment?" "What's happened? Let me call you Mother. What has happened, Mother?" "A great victory, dear. The war is over, and the regiment was the bravest in the field." His eyes kindled, his lips trembled. He sobbed, and the tears ran down his face. He was very weak, too weak to move his hand. "Was it dark just now?" he asked presently. "No, it was only dark to me. Something passed away like a black shadow, but as it went and the sun, oh, the blessed sun, how beautiful it is, touched my face, I thought I saw a light white cloud pass out at the door. Was there nothing that went out?" She shook her head, and in a little while he fell asleep, she still holding his hand and soothing him. From that time he recovered, slowly, for he had been desperately wounded in the head and had been shot in the body, but making some little advance every day. When he had gained sufficient strength to converse as he lay in bed, he soon began to remark that Mrs. Taunton always brought him back to his own history. Then he recalled his preserver's dying words and thought, "It comforts her." One day he awoke out of a sleep, refreshed, and asked her to read to him. But the curtains of the bed, softening the light which she always drew back when he awoke, that she might see him from her table at the bedside, where she sat at work, was still undrawn. And a woman's voice spoke, which was not hers. "Can you bear to see a stranger?" it said softly. "Will you like to see a stranger?" "A stranger," he repeated. The voice awoke old memories before the days of Private Richard Doubledick. "A stranger now, but not a stranger once," it said in tones that thrilled him. "Richard, dear Richard, lost through so many years. My name," he cried out her name, "Mary." And she held him in her arms, and his head lay on her bosom. "I am not breaking a rash vow, Richard. These are not Mary Marshall's lips that speak. I have another name." She was married. "I have another name, Richard. Did you ever hear it?" "Never." He looked into her face, so pensively beautiful, and wondered at the smile upon it through her tears. "Think again, Richard. Are you sure you have never heard my altered name?" "Never." "Don't move your head to look at me, dear Richard. Let it lie here while I tell my story. I loved a generous, noble man, loved him with my whole heart, loved him for years and years, loved him faithfully, devotedly, loved him with no hope of return, loved him knowing nothing of his highest qualities, not even knowing that he was alive. He was a brave soldier. He was honoured and beloved by thousands of thousands. When the mother of his dear friend found me, showed me that in all his triumphs, he'd never forgotten me. He was wounded in a great battle. He was brought dying here into Brussels. I came to watch and tend him, as I would have joyfully gone with such a purpose to the dreariest ends of the earth. When he knew no one else, he knew me. When he suffered most, he bore his sufferings, barely murmuring, content to rest his head where yours rests now. When he lays at the point of death, he married me, that he might call me wife before he died. And the name, my dear love, that I took on that forgotten night, I know it now, he sobbed. The shadowy remembrance strengthens. It is come back. I thank heaven that my mind is quite restored. My Mary, kiss me, lull this weary head to rest, or I shall die of gratitude. His parting words are fulfilled. I see home again. Well, they were happy. It was a long recovery, but they were happy through it all. The snow had melted on the ground, and the birds were singing in the leafless thickets of the early spring, when those three were first able to ride out together, and when people flocked about the open carriage to cheer and congratulate Sir Richard Doubledick. But even then, it became necessary for the captain, instead of returning to England, to complete his recovery in the climate of southern France. They found a spot upon the Rhone, within a ride of the old town of Avignon, and within view of its broken bridge, which was all they could desire. They lived there together 6 months, then returned to England. Mrs. Taunton, growing old after 3 years, though not so old as that her bright dark eyes were dimmed, and remembering that her strength had been benefited by the change, resolved to go back for a year to those parts. So she went with a faithful servant who had often carried her son in his arms, and she was to be rejoined and escorted home at the year's end by Captain Richard Doubledick. She wrote regularly to her children, as she called them now, and they to her. She went to the neighbourhood of Aix, and there, in their own chateau, near the farmer's house she rented, she grew into intimacy with a family belonging to that part of France. The intimacy began in her often meeting among the vineyards a pretty child, a girl with a most compassionate heart, who was never tired of listening to the solitary English lady's stories of her poor son and the cruel wars. The family were as gentle as the child, and at length she came to know them so well that she accepted their invitation to pass the last month of her residence abroad under their roof. All this intelligence she wrote home, piecemeal as it came about from time to time. And at last enclosed a polite note from the head of the chateau, soliciting, on the occasion of his approaching mission to that neighbourhood, the honour of the company of cet homme, séjournement célèbre, Monsieur le Capitaine Richard Doubledick. Captain Doubledick, now a hardy, handsome man in the full vigour of life, broader across the chest and shoulders than he had ever been before, dispatched a courteous reply, and followed it in person. Travelling through all that extent of country after 3 years of peace, he blessed the better days on which the world had fallen. The corn was golden, not drenched in unnatural red, was bound in sheaves for food, not trodden underfoot by men in mortal fight. The smoke rose up from peaceful hearths, not blazing ruins. The carts were laden with the fair fruits of the earth, not with wounds and death. To him, who had so often seen the terrible reverse, these things were beautiful indeed, and they brought him, in a softened spirit, to the old chateau near A, upon the deep blue evening. It was a large chateau, of the genuine old ghostly kind, with round towers and extinguishers, and a high leaden roof, and more windows than Aladdin's palace. The lattice blinds were all thrown open after the heat of the day, and there were glimpses of rambling walls and corridors within. Then there were immense outbuildings fallen into partial decay, masses of dark trees, terrace gardens, balustrades, tanks of water, too weak to play and too dirty to work, statues, weeds, and thickets of iron railing that seemed to have overgrown themselves like the shrubberies and to have branched out in all manner of wild shapes. The entrance doors stood open, as doors often do in that country where the heat of the day is past, and the captain saw no bell or knocker and walked in. He walked into a lofty stone hall, refreshingly cool and gloomy after the glare of the southern day's travel. Extending along the four sides of this hall was a gallery, leading to suites of rooms, and it was lighted from the top. Still no bell was to be seen. "Faith," said the captain, halting, unashamed of the clanking of his boots, "this is a ghostly beginning." He started back and felt his face turn white. In the gallery, looking down at him, stood the French officer. The officer whose picture he had carried in his mind so long and so far. Compared with the original at last, in every lineament, how like it was. He moved and disappeared, and Captain Richard Doubledick heard his steps coming quickly down into the hall. He entered through an archway. There was a bright, sudden look upon his face, much such a look as it had worn in that fatal moment. "Monsieur le Capitaine Richard Doubledick, enchanté to receive him. 1,000 apologies. The servants were all out in the air. There was a little fete amongst them in the garden. In effect, it was the fete day of my daughter, the little cherished and protected of Madame Taunton." He was so generous and so frank that Monsieur le Capitaine Richard Doubledick could not withhold his hand. "It is the hand of a brave Englishman," said the French officer, retaining it while he spoke. "I could respect a brave Englishman, even as my foe. How much more as my friend? I also am a soldier. He has not remembered me as I have remembered him. He did not take such note of my face that day as I took of his, thought Richard Doubledick. How shall I tell him? The French officer conducted his guest into a garden and presented him to his wife, an engaging and beautiful woman, sitting with Mrs. Taunton in a whimsical old-fashioned pavilion. His daughter, her fair young face beaming with joy, came running to embrace him, and there was a boy baby to tumble down amongst the orange trees of the broad steps in making for his father's legs. A multitude of children visitors were dancing to sprightly music, and all the servants and peasants about the chateau were dancing too. It was a scene of innocent happiness that might have been invented for the climax of the scenes of peace which had soothed the captain's journey. He looked on, greatly troubled in his mind, until a resounding bell rang, and the French officer begged to show him his rooms. They went upstairs into the gallery from which the officer had looked down, and Monsieur le Capitaine Richard Doubledick was cordially welcomed to a grand outer chamber and a smaller one within, all clocks and draperies and hearths and brazen dogs and tiles and cool devices and elegance and vastness. You were at Waterloo, said the French officer. I was, said Captain Richard Doubledick, and a Badoajou. Left alone with the sound of his own stern voice in his ears, he sat down to consider. What shall I do, and how shall I tell him? At that time, unhappily, many deplorable duels had been fought between England and French officers, arising out of the recent war. And those duels, how to avoid this officer's hospitality, were the uppermost thought in Captain Richard Doubledick's mind. He was thinking, and letting the time run out in which he should have dressed for dinner, when Mrs. Taunton spoke to him outside the door, asking if he could give her the letter he'd bought from Mary. His mother, above all, the captain thought, and shall I tell her? You will form a friendship with your host, I hope, said Mrs. Taunton, whom he hurriedly admitted, that will last for life. He is so true-hearted and so generous, Richard, that you can hardly fail to esteem one another. If he had been spared. She kissed, not without tears, the locket in which she wore his hair. He would have appreciated him with his own magnanimity, and would have been truly happy that the evil days were past, which made such a man his enemy. She left the room, and the captain walked first to one window, whence he could see the dancing in the garden, then to another window, whence he could see the smiling prospect and the peaceful vineyards. Spirit of my departed friend, said he, is it through thee these better thoughts arising in my mind? Is it thou who hast shown me all the way I have been drawn to meet this man, the blessings of the altered time? Is it thou who hast sent thy stricken mother to me to stay my angry hand? Is it from thee the whisper comes that this man did his duty as thou didst, and as I did, through thy guidance, which has wholly saved me here on earth, and that he did no more? He sat down with his head buried in his hands, and when he rose up, made the second strong resolution of his life, that neither he, to the French officer, nor to the mother of his departed friend, nor to any soul, while either of the two was living, would he breathe what only he knew. And when he touched that French officer's glass with his own that day at dinner, he secretly forgave him in the name of the divine forgiver of injuries. Here I ended my story as the first poor traveller. But if I told it now, I could have added that the time has since come when the son of Major Richard Doubledick and the son of that French officer, friends as their fathers were before them, fought side by side in one cause, with their respective nations, like long-divided brothers, whom the better times have brought together, fast united. Well, there you go. That's the end of that. There is another chapter, as you can see, and I'll probably carry on with this because it's an interesting story, and it's not one I know. I'm discovering it for the first time, as are you, I assume. Although if you do know about it, then the Seven Poor Travellers, then do please let me know. As I say, it's Christmas stories, but I can't remember the chronology of when Christmas Carol was written. I think it was probably, might have been before, I don't know, I'll check and find out. I should have done my research anyway, shouldn't I? But thank you so much for being with me again, and as I mentioned right at the start, we're trying to raise some funds for theatre productions, basically, for a not-for-profit theatre company based in Birmingham, England, London, England, that's just been performing in New York, and has toured Europe in the past. And if we can get to 1,000 subscribers, apparently we can. If we do, yeah, I should probably, yes, I say come cleaner, perhaps show you about the theatre company. And if there's anything you'd like me to look at, I know a friend of mine who's quite a good actor. Her son, who's also a very good actor, has been in a couple of feature films. In fact, he was in the last Batman film. He's kind of grown up a little bit. I won't mention her name because I haven't asked her permission. But she was asking for some audition speeches for Shakespeare. Now, I know this is sort of ASMR, and I'm guessing the whole point of this is that it's helping you to relax, as indeed ASMR helps me to relax. But I suggested 1 or 2 speeches from Henry V by William Shakespeare. So we might have a look at that next time. It's also from a lovely book. So again, thank you so much for your support. I've been blown away by the wishes, the goodwill wishes. It's very, very kind of you. And if you're not a follower, then do please click the follow button, which I think is down below, isn't it? I'm never quite sure what to put in the notes. So again, thanks again to the person who showed me how to upload, showed me through this channel how to upload a short, which YouTube insist on. And we'll put Charles Dickens away for a little while. I wonder where the photograph was. No, this one is. Oh, this is going into society. This is from another story, but it's a lovely book. I keep justifying the money I spent on it. £65. I won't go on about it because it's not all about money. It's about quality. This book's been around since the 1800s. So on that note, I shall finish as Charles Dickens does in A Christmas Carol by saying thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your support by following and also for your very kind comments. And I shall see you next time. Bless us all, everyone.